God, that was a long day, I complained to myself as I walked into my apartment. Normally I work till about 5, but today everything I touched seemed to turn to crap, and on top of that one of my co-workers called in sick, so here it was 8 and I was just getting home. I threw my computer on the bed, took off my shirt and slacks, put on some sweatpants, then walked into the kitchen to get something to eat, but not having the energy to do anything more, I just threw dinner into the microwave and put out some food for my roommate Sophie, who had been following me around from the moment I got home, giving little whines to express her loneliness. Sophie is the one constant bright spot in my life. No matter how tired I am or how bad my mood, she is always there by my side with nothing but trust, love, and the boundless energy of a puppy. Well, when I mean puppy, I'm talking about her enthusiasm, certainly not her size. She's a Rottweiler and tips the scales at about 110 pounds, so because of her size and breed, most people when they see her immediately try avoid her. Poor Sophie, all she wants is to cuddle and have her belly scratched. Once we were done eating, I looked over at the clock. All I wanted to do was go to bed, however Sophie was sitting there with her head on my leg looking up at me with her big puppy dog eyes. I know. I sighed. Don't look at me like that, you know I can't resist anything you ask when you do that. I smiled at her while scratching her behind the ears and under the chin. You've been cooped up all day, haven't you? I'm sorry I had to work so late. I apologized as she rolled over all 4 legs in the air while I gave her furry belly a good scratch. As I got up and changed into a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, as Sophie watched me with great enthusiasm by the door, her little nub wiggling madly in anticipation. I grabbed her leash, my cell phone and a flashlight from the table next to the door, and we started our walk down the street to the park about a block away from my apartment. Being a Friday, there are only a few people out as we entered the park, most of the people being at the restaurants and pubs that line the main street. As we make our way through the park, the sweet and smoky smell of barbecue invades my nose, wafting by on the warm fall breeze, followed a few moments later by the unmistakable smell of Chinese and then pizza. These heavenly odors made my stomach grumbling, reminding me all I had for dinner was a lousy microwave dinner. As we circled back and approached the entrance to the park again, I paused for a while to let Sophie sniff around a few bushes to catch up on the day's dog news before she provided her own update. While standing there, I was reminded again that it was Friday as the noise of the nearby bar on the corner invaded the peace of the night. I could see the patio was full with people unwinding from a long, stressful work week and being late. I'm sure more than a few were already a few sheets to the wind. Once Sophie was done catching up on the day's news and cleaning up the results of her exchange, we left the park and started heading back up the street when suddenly Sophie stopped, her head cocked to one side and her ears perked up. A few seconds later, I heard the frantic slapping sound of bare feet echoing slightly off the buildings and getting louder over the monotone noise of the bar crowd that faded into the night as we rounded the corner. Just as I started to take a few steps back down to the corner to see if I could tell where that sound was, someone came around at a full run, crashing headlong into me. Out of reflex, as we collided, I put my arm around the person and spun around to try keep my balance, but as I did, I felt their foot catch and trip over mine, and their momentum pulled both of us to the ground. With the street lights out on this corner of the block, all I could make out was a shadow of the person as they lay there panting and weeping softly on the ground. My heart pounding in my ears, I got up and was just about to say something when I heard the sound of a pair of heavy running footsteps getting louder. Just when whoever it was in pursuit came around the corner and within view, there was a massive tug on Sophie's leash which pulled me backwards, and as I turned around to try and regain my balance, I reached into my back pocket and turned on the flashlight. As I raised it, 2 guys skidded to a halt in front of me, panting and with faces red. They raised their hands up in front of their eyes to block the light. Sophie immediately reacted with a deep growl and a loud snarling bark as she rose up on her back legs and lunged at the 2 men, generating a startled expletive from them before they turned tail and ran back around the corner into the darkness. After the guys took off, my mind had a chance to catch up what had just happened in the space of few seconds. I had no idea what was going on, and I didn't get a good look at the guys, but whoever this person was, they were safe now. As I raised the light up to see who it was, I found a young woman on the ground with her arms tightly holding her knees tucked up against her chest and her face buried against them, sobbing. She was wearing a blue summer dress with long tiers on the side and the front. She looked up at me, her body shaking slightly with a terrified look on her red tear-stained face. Sophie let out a whimper and with head low patted over to her and sniffed. "No. Please," she cried out as she flinching away. "Please. Please leave me alone." She cried again as she backed away in fear, her hands trying to hold close the front of her dress, but as the tear in the side of her dress opened up a bit I could see there were scratch marks on her leg and interthigh and dirt covered her bare feet. "Sophie, it's okay, leave her be," I said as I reached down and rubbed her head and neck. "Are you okay?" I asked the young woman. What a stupid question that was. Why do people always ask that? Of course she wasn't okay, she must have just been attacked by those two guys. Yeah, alright, she was still alive and there were no obvious signs of anything more serious than a few scrapes, but she was far from okay. She just looked up at me, wiping her face with a trembling hand, and nodded. I couldn't help but think despite everything that she had such a pretty face. It was then that I caught a glimpse of the silver charm she wore around her neck, which made me smile. "Here," I said as I offered her the flashlight. Reaching up and taking the flashlight, she directed it at me and Sophie, getting a look at us for the first time. "Come on," I said, reaching out to her. She took my hand and I helped her to her feet. After a quick search, she found her handbag a few feet from where we collided, but only one of her heels, which she grabbed and stuffed in her handbag before looking back at me. "Come on, let's get off the street, my place is only a short distance away," I said, pointing down the street. The young woman said nothing and just nodded again before following alongside me. Once we reached the apartment, she immediately walked over to the couch, which had a light blanket over the back of it. Grabbing the blanket, she sat down and tucked her legs up to her chest and wrapped it around herself as I took off my shoes and put Sophie's leash on the table and took out my cell phone and started to dial. "Who are you calling?" she asked, suddenly concerned. "The police, of course. Those men attacked you, didn't they?" I replied, thinking what a stupid question. "No. No cops," she exclaimed, sitting up on the couch. "What? What do you mean, no cops?" "Those guys attacked you. We need to report that. You can't let those bastards get away with shit like that." "Please don't," she cried out, then paused. "It's complicated. Just please don't," she asked in low voice as she settled back down on the couch, looking at me with her beautiful pleading eyes. I stared at her in disbelief for a few seconds. Why would she not want to call the cops? This is ridiculous. Those assholes should be tracked down and dragged off. However, looking back at her, I relented and hit the cancel button on the phone and put it down. "All right," I said. "I don't understand, but all right," I told her as she let out a sigh and a look of relief flashed across her beautiful face. There was obviously something that she wasn't telling me, something that she was trying to hide, but there was no way I could ask her, and she wasn't going to tell me anyway. I walked past her into the bathroom and grabbed some hydrogen peroxide, Neosporin, and a box of bandages and returned to set them down on the coffee table, then went into my bedroom and retrieved a pair of sweat shorts and an oversized t-shirt for her to wear. Sophie this entire time was just sitting next to the couch, her taking and took no action to approach her any closer. She just watched and let out a little whine every now and then. "You don't need to do this," she said as she took the clothes from me. "It's fine. You won't call the cops and you can't go out with your dress ripped like it is and without shoes," I said. "Can you call a friend to pick you up?" I don't really have any friend that I can call," she replied in a small voice. "I just moved here a month ago." "Look," I said as I sat down on the couch next to her, but she immediately reacted by wrapping the blanket tighter around her and moving away. I let out a sigh. She obviously wasn't going to let me get anywhere near her, so there was little more I could do help her at this point. "All right," I said, putting my hands up and getting up to walk over to the refrigerator and grabbing the largest glass I had. I poured myself some milk. "Why don't you stay here tonight then? You can sleep on the couch and there are some snacks in the top cabinet if you hungry," I said, gesturing. "There's also milk, or if you like wine, in the fridge." Just try to take care of some of those scrape and cuts, please, I said, gesturing to the bandages and stuff I placed on the coffee table. I'll stay in the bedroom and keep the door shut. I promise I won't come out till morning unless you need anything, I said as I walked toward the bedroom door. Okay? With her head still bowed, she didn't reply, just nodded. Sophie, come on, I said, gesturing for her to come with me into the bedroom, but she just looked over at me and then back to the young woman. Come on, Sophie, let her sleep, I said again. However, Sophie still refused to move. Sophie? I asked as I walked over to her and got down on one knee to scratch her head and neck, but it was obvious now that she had no intention of leaving the young woman's side. Looks like you have a guardian tonight, I chuckled to the young woman. You're not going to let anything happen to her, are you? I asked Sophie as I continued to scratch her neck and chin. All right, keep an eye on our guest, I told Sophie as I got up and looked over at the young woman. While she still looked in shock from the night's event, she seems more at ease and gave a wan little smile while looking at Sophie firmly planted by her side. Satisfied the young woman was in good pause, I got up and walked into the bedroom and shut the door. After taking a few gulps of milk, I took off my shirt and jeans, slipped into my sweatpants, and got into bed. A few minutes later in the living room, I heard the sound of footsteps and the bathroom door closed, then the running of water. After a minute the water stopped, the door opened again, followed a few seconds later by the refrigerator door opening before the light eventually went out in the living room. I'm glad she's all right, I thought to myself as I settled back deeper into my pillow. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept playing back over and over again what happened. God, what would have happened if Sophie wasn't there? What would I have done? Shit, what could I have done? I would like to think that I would have jumped to her defense. Two guys attacking a young woman, the very thought outraged me, but what could I have done to stop them? Hell, each of those guys were at least 50 pounds bigger than I am. It's easy to think now after the fact that I would have came to her rescue, but the truth is I don't know. To think that I would stand by and let her be attached to, afraid about my own safety to help, made me feel so small and vulnerable. I don't think that feeling is right, but I don't think it would be unreasonable either. Still, the very thought made me feel so ashamed. I didn't sleep very well that night. I kept seeing her terrified face and kept dreaming of being chased. Alone and scared, no matter how fast I ran, my unknown pursuers were there. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them, their hands right behind me, and alone in the dark I cried. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat, feeling more tired than when I went to sleep. Reaching over and turning the clock to see what time it was, I grunted and flopped back down, staring up at the ceiling, still unable to shake the uneasy feeling. I listened for a bit but heard nothing but silence, so I got up and opened the door to the living room. Pausing before I entered to see if the young woman was up, I noticed she was still bundled up on the couch, the blanket tightly held to her and covering her head. Sophie, still keeping guard, was on the floor next to the couch, only raised her head briefly before settling back down. I walked into the bathroom to take care of business and splash some cold water over my face before going into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of milk. I refilled Sophie's water bowl and put some food out for her, but still she refused to move from the young woman's side. I walked over next to Sophie, who sat up to greet me. "You're such a good girl, aren't you, protecting her all night?" I said as I continued to pet her. "Thank God you were there. I don't think I could have protected her like you did," I whispered to her as she licked my face. "Stop that," I laughed as I stood up and walked back to the bar to take another sip of milk and find some breakfast. Sophie padded over to the young woman and sniffed a bit before grabbing the blanket in her mouth and giving a tug. The young woman, roused from her sleep, instinctively started to tug back. Sophie, being the big puppy that she is, thought this was a wonderful game and set her paws back and pulled as hard as she could. With a startled cry, the young woman was pulled off the couch onto the floor, landing with a soft thud. "Hey!" she cried, still partially wrapped up in the blanket with one leg still up on the couch. "Sophie, hey, leave her alone, you big puppy." I laughed as I took a step forward to grab Sophie. It was then that I noticed it. The shorts she was wearing were bunched up tight from being pulled off the couch, and there between her legs was an unmistakable bulge. Noticing the shocked look on my face, she immediately pulled her leg down and while pulling her knees up to her chest wrapped the blanket around her again and stared down at the floor. Silence. Neither of us said a word. It was probably only for 10 seconds, but it seemed like hours. When she finally looked back up at me, I don't know what my expression was. I think my mouth was still open, but her reaction was instant and her face defiant. "What?" she accused me as she got up. "Go on, say it. Do it. You know you want to. I'm a freak, right? Right." She yelled at me, her hands clenched into fists. "Come on, do it. Call me a pervert, a freak, a sissy, a fag. You're no different than anyone else. Don't judge me. You have no idea about who I am or what I went through," she yelled at me, throwing off the blanket and reaching for her bag. "Hey, where are you going? Isn't it obvious?" she said as she looked at me with her beautifully defiant eyes before turning around and walking to the door, but stopped before getting there. "I know what you're thinking, and no, I didn't come on to those guys," she said in a soft voice, her back still toward me. "They kept harassing me. I kept trying to get them to stop, but they wouldn't. They kept touching me, saying how I wanted it," she stammered, her voice breaking up and looking back at me as she started to cry. I slapped one of them in the face, but he just laughed and stuck his hand up my dress. She dropped her bag and covered her face with her hands, sobbing. He got angry. I was so scared I just left the bar, but they followed, calling me a sissy fag. Then they grabbed and I couldn't, she cried out in frustration as she fell back against the wall, her face buried in her shaking hands. The sound of her sobbing filling the room was broken only when I slapped my hand hard down on the bar. "Don't put me in the same category as those assholes," I said back. "I don't care what others might have done or what others think. I'm not them. I was just surprised is all. I mean, I didn't expect to see a beautiful young woman with a I said, clumsily rolling my wrist in a you-know-what-I-mean gesture as I looked away. It was her turn to have a shocked look on her face as she looked back at me, her sad eyes once again becoming defiant. Silence again. I didn't know what to say. What more could I say, or was there to say? I have read stories about this kind of thing happening before. Gay panic, I think they called it, and people have gotten away with assault and murder based on that excuse. What does that tell you about human nature and about the darkness and ignorance within the human soul? How can it be when a person finds someone or something out of the scope of their ideal narrow little world that the first reaction is anger and violence? How could anyone believe or expect that reaction to be reasonable on any level? It makes me sad and a bit ashamed to realize that mankind hasn't really evolved as much as we like to think since we came down from the trees. Despite our high ideals, we are still pretty much animals inside. As I looked at her standing there with that defiant look on her face, I couldn't help but admire her. She was so strong, I thought, so much stronger than I am, and so open and honest to herself compared to me. One word came immediately to mind when I looked at her, one perfect word. Truth. She was being true to herself no matter what. The awkward silence was broken by Sophie as she padded over to her and licked the young woman's hand. It was then for the first time I saw a smile on her beautiful face as she got down on one knee and hugged Sophie, whispering to her, "Thank you." I walked over to the couch and looked over at the torn blue dress on the arm. "You said you didn't really have any friends to call to take you home, didn't you?" She shook her head. "I only moved here a month ago. I thought I could start over and be free of the past to just be myself, but it seems she said and then chuckled. What? I asked. I just realized that I left the bar without paying for my food, she replied as she got up and wiped a tear from her eye. I guess I could call you a cab as I don't have a car, I said, rubbing my neck. But, I started to continue before she interrupted. That's okay, I'll find my way back home myself. I've already put you through so much trouble. Look, you can't go out like that, I mean, I said, gesturing awkwardly again. Looking at her, it was obvious she needed something better to wear, and none of my clothes were going to do the trick. "I'll be okay," she said, looking down. "I'll just, well, kind of, she said, crossing her legs and smiling before reaching for her bag and heading again toward the door. God, she was so beautiful and strong, I couldn't help myself but be attracted to her. "Wait, please," I called after her. "You can't, if you go out like that," I said as she stopped and looked back at me. "I can, you can have." I stammered, my face twisted in indecision, and she gave me a puzzled look, obviously wondering what the hell I was talking about. After a few seconds, I let out a moan. "Oh God." I cried out. "Wait here," I told her, and I walked into the bedroom. When I came back out, she was sitting back down on the couch petting Sophie, causing her little nub of tail to go a mile a minute. As I approached, she noticed what I was carrying, and her expression turned to one of profound shock. "You," she started to say as she raised her hand to her mouth. "Here, wear this," I said quietly, my face bright red as I handed her a yellow summer dress before placing a pair of heels on the couch. The look of shock never left her face as she looked down at the dress, then back at me, then at the shoes, and back at me again. "Hey, don't judge me," I said with a smile, to which she just giggled and put her hand over mine and took the dress. I turned around and walked back into the bedroom while she changed, and after a minute she called me back in. Giving a little twirl, she smiled at me. "How do I look?" Beautiful," I said as I stared at her. "It's absolutely amazing, we're about the same size. Even the shoes fit pretty good," she said with a devilish little smile as I turned bright red and stared at the floor. "Listen," she said as she walked up to me and took my hands. "Thank you. Thank you so much for everything." "You're welcome," I said simply. "You never did tell me your name." I smiled. "Or should I just call you Mott?" I asked. A surprised smile flashed across her face as her hand reached for the silver charm she wore around her neck. "It fits you perfectly." I smiled. "And yes, I know who she is," I said before she had a chance to ask. "Alice," she replied. "It's been a pleasure to meet Alice. My name is James," I said formally, which just made her laugh as she walked to the door and opened it. "Hey, did you need me to call a cab or walk you home?" I asked. "No, I think I'll be okay." She smiled. "Now, Alice, could I? I know we just met, and under the circumstances it must seem kind of weird, but how could I? Will I see you again?" "You want to see me again?" she asked with a raised little eyebrow. Yeah. I think you're amazing. I really admire you," I stammered lamely. "Admire me, hun?" she replied with a mischievous little smile, striking a bit of a sexy pose. Yes, I think," I tried to respond, blushing. "Oh. What is it you think?" she asked as she walked back over to me with a slight sexy little strut. "Maybe we'll see each other again," she said mischievously as she gave me a hug and leaned in close to give me a quick kiss, and then whispered softly in my ear. "I still need to return the dress and shoes to you." On a beautiful sunny fall morning with Sophie by my side, I stood in the doorway of my apartment and watched as Alice started to walk back home, but not before turning around with that beautiful smile of hers that seemed to light up the whole world and wave goodbye. The week dragged by and my mind wasn't really on work, as all I could think about was Alice and the events of that weekend over and over again in my head. Why, oh why did I give her that dress? What in God's name was I thinking? The one thing in the depths of my soul that I most closely protected, my most closely guarded secret, and I gave it away to a completed stranger. God, it was so embarrassing. The truth was, my dressing didn't serve any purpose other than fulfilled of my own simple need for pleasure, but it wasn't just that, there was something more to it, something deeper that meeting her had stirred up stronger than ever. I couldn't help but think that fate had brought us together for a reason. It early evening Friday when a knock on my door filled my heart with dread. Sophie was already at the door, her little nub of a tail wagging wildly in anticipation, but I froze. Another knock and then another before I walked over to the door and opened it. There she was, as beautiful as I remembered her to be, smiling at me and holding in her hands 2 bags as she greeted me and asked if this was a bad time. I mumbled something and invited her in. She walked over to the bar and put down the bags. Opening one, she smiled and handed me a bottle of wine. She said she saw that I had a few bottles in the fridge and thought that I might like this one as a small gift for all I had done for her. Sophie was bounding around her in her usually puppy-like enthusiasm till she reached down and patted her head and scratched her chin. "Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you," she said to her as she reached over and pulled out of the bag a big box of Sophie's favorite dog treats. She must have saw them on the counter that night. Sophie, of course, went crazy and there was nothing left for it. Opening the box, Alice took out a treat and handed to Sophie, who practically inhaled it. Alice just laughed and lifted her hand, wiggling her fingers. "Just checking to make sure I still have them all." She laughed. Alice continued to pet Sophie and fed her another treat while I walked over to the cabinet and pulled out 2 glasses and opened the bottle of wine. "Sorry, none for me, thanks, I drove over." She smiled. I filled up my glass, put the cork back in the bottle and walked with Alice, who picked up the other bag from the bar, over to the couch. Sophie, of course, followed closely behind and sat down next to Alice with her head on her lap. "Here," she said simply and handed me the bag. I didn't need to look to know what was in it. "I just want to say thank you again for everything you did for me." I took the bag and placed it on the end table next to the couch and smiled at her. "No problem, it was the least I could do," I replied awkwardly. "Is there something wrong?" she asked and put her hand on my leg. I took another large sip of my wine. "No, nothing." "Why?" I replied nervously. She just looked at me for a moment and then started to get up. "Well, I guess I should get going. Thanks again for all your help," she said with a slight edge. Reaching down, she again scratched Sophie's chin and head. "And thank you to Sophie." She started to walk towards the door and my heart skipped a beat as I watched her. Did she think that she was making me uncomfortable? Shit, she probably thinks it's all her fault. "Wait, please," I asked and started to raise from the couch before she got halfway to the door. I'm sorry." Alice stopped and turned around, putting her hand on her hip. "Please don't get me wrong, it's not you." "I'm sorry, it's just that, well." I stammered, unable to get the words out. "You're embarrassed about being a crossdresser?" Alice asked, finishing my thought, or at least part of it. I sat back down with my face burning and looked away, too embarrassed to meet her gaze. She walked back over to the couch and sat back down next to me. Reaching out, she put her hand on mine and gave it a squeeze. "It's okay, I understand." I took another sip of the wine, thinking now for some strange reason how good it was. "I'm sorry. I don't want to upset you. It's just that It's okay. I understand." She interrupted me before I could finish the sentence. "You're afraid that I'll think you're some kind of pervert because you dress to fulfill your sexual fantasies, is that right?" I started to say something, but she again beat me to it. "It's all right, I understand. You're not the only guy in the world who has these dreams and desires. I just didn't want to upset you. You're living your life how you want to, and I didn't want you to think that I was mocking you," I said in a small, soft voice. Giving my hand another squeeze. "It makes me very happy to know that you care so much for me. It took a lot of guts to hand me that dress and shoes." She smiled, gesturing with her eyes toward the bag on the end table. Actually, I didn't think much of what would happen afterwards. At that moment, I was just thinking of might happen to you. I laughed. She just laughed at that. She must think I am idiot. Let me ask you a question, she said, suddenly turning serious. Does me being who I am bother you? I hesitated to answer her. I looked over at her and I could see the look of disappointment in her eyes. Her face never changed, but her eyes told a different story. I see, she said simply and removed her hand from mine, looking away. No, I said finally. You being who you are doesn't bother me. She was unconvinced. It's me, I said in a small voice. What, being a cross-dresser? She asked. Of course that doesn't matter to me at all. No, it's not that. It's just that. I started to say but stopped. Getting up and going over to the bar, I grabbed the bottle of wine, pulled out the crock and refilled my glass. You're not bi, are you? She asked me as she suddenly realized my apprehension. No, I said. Yes, maybe, I don't know. I then stammered. Look, it's just for a long time now I have been wondering what it would be like, to actually be with another man. I confessed, lowering my head. So, she asked me. Is it disturbing to you to have these thoughts? She must think that I am a complete asshole. No, please, that's not it. You don't understand. It's just that. I tried to finish, but let out a sigh and sat down on one of the bar stools. Alice walked over to me and put her hand on my shoulder. I looked up at her and she could see a tear in my eye. Again she smiled, giving my shoulder another squeeze. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to find out that the person who I was with just wanted to put another notch in his belt and brag about how he took my virginity. I rubbed my eye and looked over at her. I don't want it to be about lust, about just fulfilling a desire. What about the other guy? She asked. What do you mean? I asked. What if you didn't like it? How do you think the other guy would feel if afterwards you just left? Don't you think he would feel that you just used him? She paused, looking at me. There is nothing wrong with the way you feel, we've all felt that way. I think she realized that there was something more to it than I was admitting to. Or are you afraid if you tried it might bring up even deeper feelings? She asked softly and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. She was quick to add after seeing the look on my face and quickly dropped that line of thought. I can see why you feel the way you do. She continued. I think most of all you need to find balance in your life, but you seem to be afraid of finding out how you truly feel. Now you feel alone and trapped because you don't think you have the strength to take that first step, and there is no one in the world you can open up to about it. She paused, looking over at me. Look at me, she said, gesturing to herself. I'm not strong and I don't think I'm particularly brave. I just found the balance my life needed and embraced it. I took that first step and I know you can too. I just sighed to myself. She was right, I was always hiding behind something. Even my cross-dressing was a way to satisfy my desires without having to interact with anyone else. I could be safe and secure behind my locked door and trunk away from the world, so no one, not even myself, would know my deepest desires and how I really felt. You're right, I have been hiding, I know that, I said softly, shaking my head. Then I pulled her toward me and wrapped my arms around her, and as we embraced she repeated the words, I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm so glad I met you, I said to her, still together in that warm embrace. It took someone as strong and as beautiful as you to make me say it. To get me to admit things that I have had problems admitting to myself. I started to laugh. I'm sorry, I said, still laughing. It's just I can't believe I'm having this conversation. Wiping a tear from my eye. I think I'm drunk. I chuckled. I think you are too, she agreed. Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you. She finished with a wink and that same wicked little smile I was starting to love so much. So you don't think I'm a complete asshole? No, I think you're a sweet guy. You just need to be honest about your feelings and have the courage to take that next step if you really want to and find the balance in your life. I nodded in agreement and chuckled again. Honestly. She began looking at me and running her hand through her hair. Despite all your insistence about how brave you think I am, you're actually the brave one. She smiled and reached down to pet Sophie, who sensed that this was a good time to capture back some attention and had walked over to sit next to her again and lick her hand. It took a lot of courage to tell me all those things. She continued, still looking down and scratching Sophie's chin. It was easier because of you. I don't think I would have admitted it to anyone else. She just smiled in agreement. Well, she said, looking at her watch. I need to get going. I'm actually already late, but I'm glad we had a chance to talk. She replied, suddenly all serious and deadpan. She gave Sophie one last pat and turned around and headed for the door. Pausing for a moment at the knob, she just opened it and left, not even saying goodbye or looking back. I think I actually heard my heart collapse. I let out a sigh and my shoulders sank to my knees. I looked down at Sophie, who just looked up at me, her tongue sticking out to one side. Shit. I was just about to turn around when the door suddenly opened and Alice stuck her head back in with a huge Cheshire cat grin on her face. You didn't think I was just going to leave, did you? You little minx. That's why she paused at the door. She was making sure it was unlocked. So, what are you doing Sunday? She asked as she walked back over to me with her hands behind her back and that grin still plastered on her face. On nothing. I think my mouth was open when I said it. I managed to get the day off, so how about we go out somewhere? Sure. I replied like an idiot. How about the museum? They have a new exhibit that came in this month I've been wanting to see. Afterwards, perhaps we can hit up a coffee house? I'm not really up for a museum. She shrugged. I know. How about a girl's day out? Okay. Why did that make me nervous? Shopping. She smiled. We can head down to the West End Mall. That's a bit far away, isn't it? I said as I didn't have a car. Don't worry about it, I'll drive. That right, I forgot she said she had a car. I was so used to not having one that I didn't even think about it. Sure, that sounds like fun. I could use a few new things. Great. She smiled. I'll pick you up around 1. Sound good? Sure. She gave me her number as I walked her to the door and opened it for her. Thanking me again, she leaned over and gave me a quick kiss on the lips. Bye. Was all she said as she left, but it was a very sexy bye. Chapter 02. The next day, I must admit, I was like a kid on Christmas Eve. Everything else I had to do or think about was pushed aside in anticipation for Sunday. I thought it was a bit odd that she wanted to drive all the way out to the West End Mall, as there were plenty of shops here and a mall on the other end of town, but after thinking about it I realized the reason. Since those 2 guys that attacked her were probably local, there is a good chance we would run into them again if we were downtown at a shop or the museum. Friggin' jerks! I really wanted to visit the museum as the new exhibit was works from Stedwig, one of my favorite new artists. Oh well, maybe next week I'll go myself. As the saying goes, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like, and this town had a serious artist community. My best friend Gregory was actually a local artist, and I myself, while I had dabbled in a bit of paint and pen, was a poor amateur at best, but there was one artistic media I was actually pretty good in: photography. Gregory actually asked me to help him out on a few of his pieces, and I took photographs of his work for a catalog. It was nothing big, and despite Gregory's insistence that my work was good, I felt I was nowhere near worthy of him or his friends. Still, it felt good to not be a total outsider when we got together and his artist friends were about. It was funny. Gregory and I had two sets of friends. He had his artist friends which I hung out with, and I had my tech friends which he hung out with. Gregory was very keen on technology and genuinely enjoyed hanging out with them as we talked shop. I would usually meet up with the guys of my group at least once a week along with Gregory at one of the local bars to hang out, play pool, watch a game, and of course drink. That's one of the downsides to living so close to everything. It's all within easy stumbling distance from your bed. Sunday arrived painfully slow, and as it's my usual ritual on my days off to sleep, and I woke up as late as possible. Honestly, I would not have been out of bed till about 1 at least if I didn't have plans. Once I actually got moving, I made some breakfast and put out some food for Sophie. I didn't bother to call out to her as she wouldn't have come. She was still in the bedroom as she had adapted my laziness by default. After I ate, I showered and dried myself off in front of the full-length mirror in the bathroom. I didn't look too bad, I thought. Yes, I was skinny, but it was a fit skinny. A few months ago, I noticed some love handles developing and started a regimen of sit-ups to head that off, so as a result I had a flat, tight stomach. I always liked the fact that I actually had small hips and an ass that stuck out, but looking at myself I wished that the fat on my waist was just 2 inches lower and my ass was just a little plumper to fill out that slight concaveness along the top. Looking over at the clock snapped me out of my daze, and I quickly dressed in a nice patterned shirt, jeans, and a pair of shoes. Once done, I walked into the living room, and noticing there was still about 15 minutes till Alice came around, I cleaned up a bit. The place didn't really need it as I was a bit of neat freak, but being one I still needed to. My heart jumped at the sound of a knock on the door, and I quickly invited her in while I grabbed a light jacket just in case and my bag. "Where's Sophie?" she asked, looking around, fully expecting her to come bouncing out from somewhere to greet her. I just laughed. "She's still in the bedroom. She's a bit lazy and likes to sleep in." Of course she got that from me, as I normally don't wake up till about now. She just laughed at that and we left. You can tell a lot about a person, I think, by the car they drive. I figured that she would have an ultra-stylish little city car like either a Mini or the new 500. What she actually drove surprised me, a BMW M5 sedan. "You like?" she asked with a little knowing smile. It was about a 40-mile drive, so we had a bit of time to make some small talk. I had planned to use the time to ask a few questions about her, but the conversation turned to her car and cars in general. I admitted I am a bit of a car bore, which is funny considering I currently don't have a car, but I could talk about cars all day. It didn't matter what kind of car either, cheap to exotic, I loved them. I was shocked to find out that Alice was a bit of a bore herself. "I wanted something luxurious," she explained. "Something that would pamper me, but with a hammer under the bonnet." She laughed. "A girl needs to have some fun." We got to the mall in a surprising short period of time. Either I was having so much fun talking to her about cars that I didn't notice the time, or she was flogging it on the way there. We parked and she grabbed my hand and pulled me close to her. "Ready for some fun?" she asked with that wicked little smile. Oh man, I think I'm in for an interesting time, and boy, I was right. I think we hit up every clothing store in the mall, and Alice was like a predator diving into each and heading right to the good stuff. I lost track of time as we went, but it didn't matter, this was her element, I was just along for the ride. After about the third store, I got the distinct feeling that she was testing me. As she pulled me along with her, she would hand me each article of clothing she picked out, asking me how I thought they felt and if I liked the color. Then she would push me in front of a mirror and hold up a blouse, a skirt, or even a dress in front of me and ask how I thought they looked. Anything, and I mean anything, that she looked at was passed through my hands, and she would ask my opinion on all of it. I was trying hard to keep things level and act nonchalant. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me embarrassed. The truth of the matter was I have having a blast. I would always walk by the windows of the stores and wonder to myself how the dresses would look on me, how they would feel, or what style or color I would buy if I was a woman. I never had the opportunity to go in and actually experience the sensation of touching the soft fabric and feel how it flowed through my hands. I think Alice a while ago noticed my awkward stretching as I discreetly put my hand in my pants to do some adjustments, but if she did, she never said anything. However, that smile on her face told me she did. It was while we were in Victoria's Secret that she finally got me. I was casually following behind her, very discreetly running my hands through some panties when she came up behind me and pulled a gorgeous lace purple bra across my chest and asked me in a whisper what my bra size was, and without thinking I said 30-60D. She just giggled and replied nice before giving me a quick kiss and diving back into the selections, leaving me alone with a very red face. We had covered one end of the mall to the other, and while I was walking back with her carrying her spoils, all 10 bags of it, I happened to look down one of the corridors and noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Situated in that faraway isolated area of every mall where little traffic goes, I saw a small shop which I had missed the first time we passed. It looked a bit off to be in a mall as it had a door, but what caught my eye and brought me to stop was the sign above the door. I think Alice said something to me, but I didn't even pay attention as I walked over to the shop, and when I got a closer look at the sign, I started to laugh. Alice walked up next to me and asked me what was so funny, and I just pointed to the sign that read "Smells are us" with the "are" backwards. She looked at it for a moment, then getting the joke started to laugh as well. Turned out she's read the same stories I did. We walked over to a nearby bench to sit down, still laughing. "That is just too funny," she said. "When I first saw it, I thought I would have a heart attack." I laughed. "That is a funny coincidence, isn't it? I wonder if the owner of the place knew." "I don't know. It looks like the place has been closed for a while," I said. "Did you have fun today?" she asked, taking my arm and pulling me close to her with that wicked little smile of hers. I looked over at her and asked if she was testing me today. "Well, maybe a little." She laughed, holding her thumb and index finger a little bit apart. "I wanted to see if you would be embarrassed by all the attention I was giving you, but you weren't really, were you? I think the salespersons were more embarrassed than you were." She giggled. "I'm sorry, that was a cruel thing to do, wasn't it? But it was just so much fun. Honestly, I had a blast. I have never had so much fun," I admitted. "Wouldn't it be great if you were a woman? Then we could have tried on all those things together." She smiled. "I don't think I would cut it as a woman. For one thing, I'm way too lazy." I laughed. "But what if that store was what you thought it was?" she asked, looking at me seriously. "I would have been in there in a second," I replied without hesitation. "Really?" She smiled. "Nah. I was just kidding." I laughed, trying to cover up my Freudian slip. Alice just laughed at my clumsy retraction. "So ready to get going?" she asked. "Sure," I said as I grabbed up all the bags and we headed back. "You know, the way we met would make a great story." She laughed. "Yeah, it did." "What? You wrote a story about me?" she said, surprised. "Well, yes, but I didn't post it or anything. I wouldn't do something like that without your permission." I laughed. "So you have posted stories before?" "Yeah, a few. Well, actually only one, but in several parts." I shrugged. "What name do you go by?" "I might have read them," she asked. "Chris K." So can I read it?" she asked, giving my arm a squeeze. "Sure, it's there on the site, anyone can read it." It turned out okay, I guess, at least for a first attempt. "No, silly, I mean the story about how we met." She laughed. "Oh. Yeah, sure, I can email it to you if you want. I can't wait to read it, and if it's up to my standards, I might let you post it." She laughed. We dropped off her spoils in the car and I was about to suggest going back to get something to eat when she told me to hop in while she punched something up on the GPS and then we were off. Turned out she took me to a really nice Indian restaurant and while we were waiting for our food she took the lead in our conversation. First we started to talk about what was going on in the world, then the conversation jumped to politics, then over to science chatting about the latest NASA discoveries. I had never been with anyone who had such an interest in the world and such a broad range of topics. It was fantastic. I could jump from seemingly any topic to another and she wouldn't miss a beat. I was in love. Chapter 03. After dinner we drove back, but instead of stopping by my place we went straight to hers. Once again she surprised me when I found out she lived in one of the new loft condos reconstructed from the many old warehouses that dotted the town. I had actually looked at one of these places a few years ago when they were first completed and even the cheapest one bedroom was $300,000, so I could only imagine what she paid as we rode the elevator to the top floor and entered into her 3-bedroom 4-bath castle. It was as I expected it to be inside, unbelievably amazing. A 2-story living room was the centerpiece with 2 bedrooms on the first floor and a master suite taking up the whole second. As you walked in, a large wraparound granite bar framed a stainless steel gourmet kitchen and to crown it all off, a balcony taking up the full length of the living room facing the downtown area. I put down the bags next to the kitchen bar and looked around trying to take it all in. She had the place decorated with modern furniture and everywhere I looked there was artwork. She asked if I would like some wine and grabbed 2 glasses and a bottle as I followed her out to the balcony. On the way through the living room there was a painting on the wall that I recognized as a Stedwig. Damn, she had great taste. Once out on the balcony she poured us a glass and we had a little toast to a fantastic day as we sat back on the love seat and took in the magnificent view. You probably have a lot of questions about me, don't you? She said, breaking the silence. I nodded in agreement, taking another sip. Well, I am usually very, very careful about who I let know about my past. She smiled. It's not just for the obvious reasons, but well, being who I am, it would be easy to attract a person who is just interested in me for all the wrong reasons. Okay? I was a bit confused. The truth of the matter is I'm a bit a princess. You obviously noticed by the car and condo I have money, or should I say my family has money. Honestly, I really don't have what you would call a job. She laughed. I'm an artist. She shrugged. I just stared at her for a second, then I looked back into the living room through the French doors. The one painting I saw on the way out wasn't the only one. I then recognized as a Stedwig from the artist's online gallery. On the back wall there were 6 more. Holy shit! A stunned look of realization on my face. You're Alicia Stedwig. While when I first saw Alice she reminded me a bit of Alicia, I didn't actually think it was her. So no wonder she didn't want to go to the museum her work was on display. She just looked down at her lap, embarrassed, and nodded. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before, but you can understand the position I'm in, can't you? She laughed. Even being semi-famous can be a real pain in the ass, and in some respects I'm more secretive about that than I am about being transgender. I just assured her it was all right. I completely understood. It made perfect sense. So since you already know some of it. She giggled. I might as well tell you. Alice went on to tell me about her family and growing up. Her mother was studying to be a lawyer when she met her father and they fell in love. While her mother went on to finish law school, her entrance into the field was delayed by her pregnancy with Alice. Alice was always a petite boy and had shown an interest in more feminine things from a young age despite her father's best efforts. When she was 13, her mother came back from work early to catch Alice in her room wearing one of her dresses, sitting at her vanity trying on makeup. Alice thought she would die, but her mother was actually very understanding about it, even encouraging, but told her to keep it a secret from her father. She carried on that way for a few more years with her mother and her spending their days together in the house when father was away on one of his business meetings as mother and daughter. Everything was going fine until she was 16. While she found an attraction to girls, it was much stronger toward other boys, and it was one afternoon after school that she was home with her boyfriend in the den that her father unexpectedly walked in to find them engaged mid-passion. To say he took it badly would have been an understatement. The only thing that saved the situation was that her mother walked in a few minutes later. The argument that followed was epic and ended only after her father stormed out of the house in disgust. There was great uneasiness in the house after that, but her father never really brought up the subject again, knowing that her mother had given Alice her full support. She and her mother decided at that point that she should continue on with how things were till she was 18, but she did enter counseling. It was once she entered college that she started to transition. Alice had always felt that it was her fault for the rift that opened up between her parents after that point, but her mother kept assuring her that it wasn't. It was during the summer when she was 18 that they got the news that her father had died of a heart attack while on one of his business trips, and the police report mentioned a young woman in the room with him at the time. Her father was a very successful financial manager, and because of his work he would spend extended periods of time away on business, and as it turned out that wasn't the only business he was doing. Before her father died, Alice never knew anything about it or that her mother had found out. Her mother never cheated on him, she kept up appearances as a loyal wife, but used that information to keep her father from interfering with Alice's life and force him to make her the sole beneficiary to his entire estate. After the funeral and the necessary legalities, her mother sold off the mansion that they were living in and moved to a modest home in an upper-middle-class neighborhood, shunning the more flamboyant lifestyle she once lived for something more down-to-earth. Art has been Alice's entire life, and it didn't matter the medium, she loved them all, but painting was her favorite. She had graduated high school with a scholarship to a prestigious art school, and being from a wealthy family, her mother had plenty of contact to people who were interested in her work, and she quickly became recognized and started to get in offers from galleries. After college, she took a job as an art teacher at an elementary school because she wanted to give back to the community, since she really didn't need the money because of her family. Being from a wealth family, whenever she sold her artwork either to private parties or at auction, all the profits were given away to charity, mainly to local and nation LGBT organizations, although due to her job she was forced to be discreet about that. However, even being semi-famous can attract attention, and it was a local reporter that took the time to dig up the truth about her past. He published an article that highlighted her family background and the fact that she was once male. While this actually made her even more popular as an artist when it came out that she was donating all the profits to charity, it did have a big adverse effect on her teaching job. The school district did not fire her for being transgender, but the parents of the children were less than understanding, and after suffering through the remaining school year she quit and moved here to try and start over. "So that's my story," she said with a sigh. "Were you seeing anyone before you came here?" I asked with some trepidation. She gave me a sad little smile and reached over to the table next to the love seat and picked up a pack of cigarettes. Taking one out, she lit it and took a long, slow drag. Holding it in for a few moments, she exhaled slowly, the smoke rushing upward in a small column to billow out and then be caught by a slight breeze and wafted away out into the night above the town. I actually had a boyfriend and a girlfriend, in fact, at the time. It's funny because they actually became friends, and all three of us used to hang out. Although not in the way you're thinking. She chuckled. He was a local artist and she was a teacher from another school district. When the story came out, she was petrified, but my boyfriend actually took the heat for her by coming out publicly that we were together. So what happened to him? We broke up shortly after, she said, taking another drag of her cigarette. We got into an argument afterwards, and he wasn't exactly understanding about the fact that I kept my family background a secret. Well, that and let's say professional jealousy. I could always tell there was a bit of resentment toward my success, but when he found out that I was a rich little Barbie doll, as he put it, he declared me a fake, and the only reason I was successful was that my mommy paid all her rich friends to say how good my work was. She spat out. I just nodded. That's the last time I ever date an artist. She laughed. Wait, you're not an artist, are you? I had to laugh. I told her that my best friend Gregory was a local artist and I dabbled a bit, but photography was just a hobby. She just laughed, putting her hand on my leg. Oh, thank God. I didn't think to ask, and if it turned out you were an artist, I would have looked like a total bitch. What did he mean by calling you a Barbie doll? I asked, confused by that last statement a bit. Well, to be honestly, these, she said, cupping her breasts. And my nose. She laughed as she took a last drag of her cigarette. So do you think? I started to ask, then stopped, realizing it was probably a very rude question to ask. Never mind. So anyway, what are you doing now? I said, trying desperately to change the subject. Do I ever think what? She asked. Come on, you don't have to hide anything from me. It's nothing, really, I replied. I didn't want to upset her by making her think that I was uncomfortable with her the way she was. Do I ever think that I will fully transition, you mean? She said. I just nodded. It's okay. She smiled. That is still a possibility, but for now I love myself as I am. I thought I wanted to fully transition, but once I got to this point it just felt, well, right. Dose your? Well, you know, I tried to say uncomfortably. My penis? She laughed. Yes, that works quite well actually. Smiling, she slinked over and snuggled up next to me. That doesn't bother you? She asked in her best sexy voice. I really like you, James, and I told you everything because I didn't want to hide anything from you. Putting her hand on my shoulder and pulling me towards her. You found out who I was from the beginning and you didn't run away. Please don't run away now. She whispered and kissed me, then let out a little chuckle. What? I asked. Did I do something wrong? I'm not a very good kisser, I guess, it's just. She brought my rambling to a dead halt with one finger placed against my lips. Shoo. That was fine. It's just the look on your face afterwards. She laughed. You're so bad. I laughed. A girl has to have some fun. She giggled as she snuggled back up next to me, and we sat a while in silence, just enjoying being together on such a beautiful night, looking out at the lights of the town. I could have stayed like that all night, but it was Sunday and I had to go to work tomorrow. So now that you know I'm sexy, smart, talented, beautiful and rich, I guess you're going to run off and I'll never see you again? She laughed as she walked me to the door. Yeah, you're absolutely horrible. I'm not sure I can take it. Joining her in the joke. So what are you doing next weekend? She asked. I'm not sure I can wait till the weekend. I laughed. How about coming over for dinner Tuesday night, say around 7? Sure, I exclaimed a bit overexcitedly, which just made her laugh. You going to be all right walking home? She asked, reaching out to grab my hand before I left. It's no problem, it's not that far. I'll see you Tuesday. I smiled and we pulled each other close for a quick kiss goodnight. Slowly we parted and she held my hand till I opened the door and stepped out. As I walked down the hall, I looked back to see her leaning against the doorframe, smiling and giving a little wiggle of her fingers as a wave as I stepped into the elevator. Out on the street and back into the beautiful night with a light heart, I walked home smiling to myself. Pausing for a moment, I looked at my watch and noticed it was 10:30. Crap, Sophie's going to be pissed. I laughed out loud to no one and hurried home.